Hello, everybody. 7 o'clock, time to start. Hey, Mike. So.
Just getting over.
Yep. We've got a two-part meeting today. One going to be all about the web page and all the great things we've put on it. Maybe show a little Dick Keeney's tour down through his valley. And then we're going to try to do land ownership and try to make sense of how you can spend no money and figure out the history of your property. Linda Myers gave me this card, and she wondered if anybody knew where this house in Fabius was. And the next question is, does anybody know who Patricia Patrick, the artist, is? And I'm right in everybody's way. So.
Yeah, it looks like Clark's house next to me.
Right over there
On Main Street.
yeah.
Just right next to the house next door.
Is that the old Clark house?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Next to my house on Main Street. Pretty sure it is. Be next to the fire department.
Oh, I don't know about that.
You don't know much.
All right.
No, that's.
Yeah. What about the artist? Patricia Patrick.
What year was that?
All we know is the card. It's a watercolor image on a card.
But it looks just like the porch is the same, the windows are the same, the addition in the back. It's higher to the left, and that's where the fire department is now.
Okay.
But that looks like, that
Okay.
house is different.
Okay.
If that ground slope is right, it's not in the village.
That's what I wondered about the.
Yeah, and that could just be an artist's beautification of the. Maybe they didn't remember what the lower part of the foundation. Whoops, I'm in trouble already. Okay, next commercial is Memorial Day. The Historical Society is going to have this whole building full of all kinds of things. We're going to bring out a collection of Mike Shea's auctions that he put on. Charlie Shea had gone on for many years collecting those, and we'll have a chance to show them, and the veterans photos and the 30-some scrapbooks. We put out the Fabius School yearbooks last year, and that seemed to excite people. The Fabius Historical Sports book will be here for sale. And then we have Sheridan Davenport, who's collected 4 generations of photos of her families and put them in beautiful scrapbooks. And she said she'll be here and spend the 2 days with us to explain all about her family. Anybody who remembers Lucille Davenport? Yeah, so when you talk to Sheridan, you see Lucille there quite a bit. And then photos of local farms and farm history. Oops. So the next part of our presentation is going to be Alex taking us through the web page and all the things that he's made available to the general public. Okay.
All right. Just introduce Alex a little bit, because some folks are brand new.
We kid Alex because we say he's the youngest member of the Fabius Historical Society. And I don't know if it makes him feel good or not, but he's taken quite an interest in Fabius from being an out-of-towner. I don't know if you want to discuss any of your background, but...
I was at a job interview this morning early, and I already discussed that, so... it will be quite a long separate story, so it will just suffice to say that in Fabius we're from 2020. That's where we got the house, about half mile from Bill on Daly Road. I think that's enough for now. Because it's not about me, it's about the website that we put a little over a year ago, so about a year and a half ago. Since then, so this is Fabius Historical Society, and the, which you can't really see, but it's literally fabiushistoricalsociety.org. If you type that, you'll get to our website. Since the time it was launched, as of yesterday, there were about 4,000 views on the website and 930 something people or separate visitors that were on this website, which of course is not a large number by any means, but it's still there are people who are visiting it and people who using it. And by the way, the most downloads that we had from the website in that time were that story about the motorcycle car crash, and where you had that description on 2 pages from the newspaper. So that was downloaded 20 times. So people are interested. So what I was going to show is how this looks and what we've done to this web page recently and what resources it has. And so obviously we start with whatever new things we have, and this is our posting about today's meeting. Then what Bill just was talking about, Memorial Day of this year. So this is this information that Bill just showed a couple minutes ago. So that's also here.
Linda, do you want to say anything about the church?
Oh, thanks. We are working diligently to get every detail done, and we have a speaker that is Colonel Charles Hudson, who lives in Poppy. Actually, I think he's on Henneberry Road. No,
Preds Falls.
Preds Falls. Thanks for that. He has definitely been so willing to be our guest speaker, and he works. I think he's with the 174th out of Syracuse. Okay, because I'm just trying to remember some of his write-up. And so we're just looking for folks and veterans and asking people to let us know if there are veterans that are not listed on our list that we announced that day, to make sure that we get it documented so that we're up to date on that. So, yeah, thank you. 9:30 service. We're really looking forward to a crowd.
So we're trying to put the announcements like this or information like this that is relevant to the society. And then there are a few videos that we had recently, which is within the last year, and we'll show some of it a little later. So this is the video with Dick Keeney on Keeney Valley.
Okay, thank you.
And then we have Randy, his talk on the barns that he had in Casanova Barns. And then this is the tour that we did with Roy Dodge along Butternut Creek and Butternut Creek Valley. And here down below there are a couple projects that we meaning like mostly Bill, are working on. So that Irving Skill Diaries that Bill digitized and John transcribed. So they're here. And again, I'll show you some of the details later. And another project is the sports book, which is complete and pretty much out of press, and it will be available on Memorial Day, right here. And you can read more about this if you follow these links. But what I was going to show more is if you go all the way to the top. So here in the resources in the menu in the resources tab, there are different things that we have on the website. And so right here on the top is, if you click on that, so this is the collection of all the newsletters that Fabius Historical Society had over past, 2022, so 20-something years. So it's in a reverse chronological order. So this is most recent one. So this is a year. It lists year, the number of the newsletter, and whenever available, a brief description of what's in that newsletter. So if you click on that highlighted columns of the newsletter number, if you click on that, then you will get PDF of that newsletter, which you can view, or you can obviously increase it. You can read it here, or you can download it. So all of that, so all these newsletters, there are a couple missing, but most of them are here. So another thing that we have is meetings. And we have basically everything that I could get a hold of from 2003 till most recent ones. So the recordings of the meetings of the Fabius Historical Society are here. They're about 130 or 120 or 130 videos. So they're on YouTube. But if you click on any of these links, so they're going into reverse chronological order. So the most recent ones are on the top, and if you scroll all the way down, this will be 2003 and so on. So if you click on a date of the recording, you will get to the YouTube page and you can watch that video. In some cases where we had slides for this presentation, so the slides would be also available here through a link. And again, this table lists the date of when the meeting took place, who presented, and the topic of the presentation. And whenever there is any additional information, so you can go to these links and explore that. And a few of these recordings on the top, so these are the kind of tours that we did with Dick Keeney or Roy Dodge. So they're not, technically speaking, society meetings, but I put them here because, well, they're mostly like presentations. We can consider them virtual meetings. So they're available here. So in that sense, so these would be, the top three would be the same as what is highlighted on that home page over here. So right now they're on the home page because they're relatively recent ones. I wanted to highlight them, but sooner or later I'll remove them from that front page because there will be something newer, but they will be always in that meeting table. So then there are other, we have page of maps. Again, there are some old maps from 1800s of the town and of the village, and there's some which, again, if you just click on that, it may take a little bit of time depending on the internet connection, but eventually it should open a PDF and you can either view it here or you can download it to your computer. And there also, below, there's some modern maps of Onondaga County that I found useful, and local maps here. And then from that down, so scrapbooks and everything below are the links to the Dropbox page that Bill created and where Bill collects and stores over many years all this information. So for example, so if you're going to scrapbooks, so you're leaving the Fabius Historical Society website, you're going to a Dropbox, and here the scrapbooks, so everything that Bill had copied and photographed and digitized essentially, so they're all available here. Same thing with the obituaries, which are divided into Fabius Historical Society and non-Fabius Historical Society sort of members, and they go alphabetically. So if you click on, say, A, then you will have these pages for people whose last name starts with A. So all this you can just do online if you're looking for somebody, or you or someone else. And then we get to these 2 pages of Irving Skill diaries that Bill was talking about. So now, and yeah, Irving Skill was a builder and Linda's grandfather, right? So he built a lot of local barns and houses in this area. So Bill had, still has, his diaries from 1893 to 1946. So this is over 50 years. And so if you follow, I'm just going back again. So if you follow the link which says original, so these are photographs of the original handwritten diaries that are, if you click on that, you go to that Dropbox page where they all stored, and they stored chronologically. So they start with 1893. Am I in the way? I guess maybe. So 1893, and they go all the way down to, well, the last one here is 45. So if you click on this PDF, so they're in PDF format, maybe. So again, depending on how fast your internet connection is, because these are fairly large files. So then you get to the diary for that year, which is 180 pages or something like this. For example, there are 2 days per page. And so that takes some time, but here it is. So that's probably the first page, right? So it says January 1st, 1908. And that's what Irving wrote for that date. And this is January 2nd, and so on and so on. So if we go back, so we were here. So now this was, even though it took a minute to show this file, this is actually a fairly small file compared to some others. Some others, if you click on them, so for example, this file, it's going to be too big to load. That's what it tells you. So it means that you cannot just look at it, you have to download it to your computer. So if you want to do this, so you have an option and you just say download. And here, because usually the most important stuff is at the bottom with a small font. So you don't need to sign up anywhere. You just say continue with download only. And if you click that, then, so you download, so in Bill's case, and I'm going to stop it because we don't need this download here. So in some cases, your download will start, depending on the settings of your computer, will start automatically, like in this case. In some cases, it may ask you where to store that file, and it will give you a window where you can choose location. So that's what you can do if your file is too big and it doesn't show up right away. So that was the original diaries, and then the diaries from 1893 to 1918, right? So those were transcribed. So Nancy Edwards and Joanne did all that work. And if you go over here, so you get, again, starting from 1893. So in this case, it goes only to 1918. These files are in Word format. They're much smaller, obviously. And again, if you click on it, then it will show up basically in typed version of what Irving Scale wrote, in this case in January of 1917, and you can go down. So this file, this Word document, will have all the entries for 1917, so all the dates, all the days in that year. Right, and there's also tally times. These are, I guess, photographs or copies of Tally Times newspaper, and it doesn't show very well the year, but they go by year also. Right, Bill? So what?
Yeah.
Do you remember which years?
So far, I've read up to 1909.
So from
1890 to 1909.
Okay, so those are also available. So if you, I guess, if you, yeah. So in this case, it tells you what times and years these are, and so if you want to explore this, you can do that. And last but not least, so Fabius Archive is, I think it's. Well, if you go here, you kind of need to know what you're looking for, because there's a lot of information here, and it's, Bill obviously knows all the system, but if you don't know, then it's may look a little messy. But there's still a lot of other information about Fabius history that's here. And again, it's available for everybody. You can explore that. Well, last but not least, so there are also a couple links for David Pilcher's work, and I put them as separate links because I just like them. His drawings and paintings, and which again, if you click on any one of them, you can enlarge them. You can make a slideshow, and this is the large collection of teapots, for which we have photographs. And I believe that, I think it's Chuck who photographed most of them, at least that was my impression. And again, I just like them, so that's why I put them on a separate link. But anywho, so this is what we have right now in the, on that web page. And I should say that, I think I mentioned it, but I want to emphasize that there are a few old videos from 2003 that I put here recently. So for this was what Bill found on these old tapes. So all that stuff from here to here was added in the last few months. So if you haven't seen them, you're welcome to watch. I mean, I like all of them, but I don't know if that's the only recording of Bob Austin that
I don't know, Linda found a disc the other day.
with more stuff.
Yeah,
Okay,
and maybe
well,
more stuff.
if anybody finds or has any old recordings of any historical value, then we can sort of work with it, and we can put it here and make it available. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say. So we'll just go back to home.
You were talking about the Tully Times. I had a phone call and met with a young man that's just got a passion for doing genealogy. And he said that he's been on a lot of sites, but Fabius site that Bill and Joanne and Alec are working on has the largest collection in 4 counties of the Tully Times. He searched and searched, and he said it's just amazing what you people put on here. So, you know, for people who are familiar with the Tully Times, it started years ago in a collection that we have on site, a great opportunity for information documented. He used several
Right. And I guess last but not least, I should say that if you want to send us a message, then you can do it through Contact Us link, and we have I don't know how many people over that time, dozen people or more, that from local and from West Coast or anywhere in between, who send emails with questions or information that they have something that they want to donate, so that message will go to Bill and myself, and then we can respond to that. So if there are no more questions, then I guess I'll turn it to Bill.
Okay. It's your last chance to ask questions on the webpage.
It's not a last chance. We can go.
Yeah.
Could you
Oh,
put on there, I have never been to one of these meetings, and there may be other people who want to come to the meeting, but I didn't know where the meeting was, because it's not on the Historical Society. So is it there somewhere?
right.
The
So
meetings are usually held here?
meetings are usually held here.
Okay, but I didn't know that. So I'm saying if there are people who are not in tune, like
Oh, you
all
mean-
are. Like if they went to the website and said, gee, I'd like to go to the meeting, and I know the meeting was tonight, but it doesn't say where the meeting is.
Okay.
Because you all know where it is.
All right.
I didn't know where it was.
Good point.
Okay.
Just a
Okay.
little thing.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
I drove by and saw it, but
Okay.
thank you.
Yes.
It's really fabulous.
Okay. Yeah. And if anybody has any suggestion, that's a good suggestion. Yes. So I know for town of Fabius, we have an address and we have location. We have a map link to pretty much the same place. So for the town. But yes, that's a very good point.
So, okay.
All right.
Thank you, Alex.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's way. May How about over here? I'll just block a few. So, I've always been anyways, I've always been very interested in understanding who worked the land that I worked on my farm before me. One day I was repairing the masonry wall under my barn 40 years ago, and Dwayne Skeel stopped over to see me, and I was late with my insurance payment, and he proceeded to tell me this fantastic story about how his father built the barn. And you know, Dwayne was a great storyteller, and you gotta listen to him. But I was very interested, and he told me that that foundation you're repairing was no damn good in the first place. My father wouldn't guarantee the barn. Wrote it in the contract as no damn good. So that's why you're repairing it. So that kind of intrigued me. The previous owner that had that barn built, did the old barn burn and damage the foundation, and he just got cheap and tried to live with that? And therefore Irving told him no guarantee on the barn? So that kind of stirred up my interest, and someday I was going to do the research to learn about all the people that owned the land. And this winter, the pile of papers Joanne dug out, put on the table, and said, here's all the stuff you need to start with to learn the stuff that you promised yourself you're going to do. So I thought, since I learned how to do it, I might come and share it with everybody else. And so I made a list of the free stuff. Anybody can turn to an attorney and hire all this research done and pay the money. And Bob could probably tell us how much it would cost.
Cheap. I don't do it anymore, so
Yeah, but you'd hire a researcher
we
and,
have an abstract company.
yeah, yeah. If I do, I block out everybody's view here, so. So I thought, okay, I'm gonna go through all the steps to learn how to do everything. So I made this list, and you know, your previous owner knows an awful lot about the property, and you should have an abstract if you bought the property. It should give you some of the details. It's probably only going to be 40 years long, but maybe the previous owner has an abstract of his property, which, if he's had it for quite a while, could give you as much as 40 more years of information. Then you can talk to your neighbors, and then you can look at maps. And then, of course, the federal New York State Ag Census, which is just a tremendous collection of information. And then the assessor's records, and then the grantee and grantor. And that's where we're going to end up. So let's just, all the land in the town of Fabius was once given to a veteran of the Revolutionary War. No other wars, all the Revolutionary War. Unfortunately, none of the 50 lots in the town of Fabius were settled by a Revolutionary War soldier. It took about 10 years from the time the war ended to the grants were available to New York State soldiers. If you were 20 or 25 years old in the Revolutionary War, waiting 10 years to get your 600 acres of land, you had a chance to sell it for a bottle of whiskey or a few shillings. You know, why not just cash in and give away your land and go on with your life? And that's what a lot of people did. Here we're going to talk a little bit about the maps. All these maps are available on the webpage. A lot of them have identification of individual homes. For me, the hard part to understand was, how did New York State end up with a big chunk of land to give to soldiers? I mean, there must have been land sold, people living all through New York State. But this little red line here is a very important line, because King George III said he would give no land to any settlers over that line, which turned out really nice for New York State. Do anybody here watch the series Outlander? Yeah. You remember Jamie and Claire coming to North America? And they had this magical line where the Indians stayed on one side and they stayed on the other. That's the red line that we're looking at right there. It was a real thing. And well portrayed in the Outlander. So, and here's a close-up in New York State, how it followed the St. Lawrence River. And that was established in 1763. This map changed a little bit, and it separated out the Adirondack region, which became kind of important to New York State. This is the second land grant area that we're seeing here. The first one was in the Adirondacks. And the soldiers and the state legislators argued nobody wanted to move to the Adirondacks for their free 600 acres. So they eventually got the treaties worked out with the Indians, and we've got this area here. 60,000 acres to give away. Nobody legally owned any of this land until it was given away to soldiers. You can see how small Onondaga County is compared to the whole land grant. This gives you an idea of some of the settlement in the central New York. This, of course, the land grant is just this chunk here, but over here is the 20 town settlement, and there's a little strip in between, and this little red spot is the Cazenovia area, and Randy Nash, in his presentation that we saw on the Fabius webpage, takes us through the history of that. So if you weren't lucky enough to come over with land grants and you had $10, you could go over to Cazenovia and put your money down and have maybe a 100-acre lot to start your farm. So if you go to the web page, you can hear Randy's presentation on that. And then, of course, here's Randy in action. So if you click on the little button underneath there, Randy takes you through the whole history of that. So here's the 28 townships. A surveyor was assigned to each one. Joseph Annan was our surveyor, and he actually blazed the trees on each one of these lots, kept a record book about all those. He named Labrador Pond, Lake Fabius. It's interesting, his river drainage was pretty accurate. Town of Fabius is unusual because we have a north and south divide in there, and he outlined it exceptional. This Butternut Creek goes north, and all this is Teofnioga going south. And it always amazed me. I looked through Syracuse University for his record book, where he talked about the conditions on each one of these lots and everything. Doesn't exist. Somehow it was lost. One thing we note here is there's no highways recorded. 1790s, no roads whatsoever. Here's the 100 lots of the town of Fabius. Everybody who was awarded. I don't know much about the lower 50 lots of the original town of Fabius. Dick Keeney's over there picking out his lot where he is. I don't know how many of these people settled on the lower 50 lots. The county of Cortland, 1808, broke off these 50 lots in its formation. This gal from Skinny Atlas wrote a whole book about one lot and the transformation of that in the town of Skinny Atlas, her lot 50. Which just amazed me that you could write 131 pages about a single lot and all the various people that bought pieces of it. New York State Legislature in 1825 forced every town to submit a map to David Burr so he could draw an atlas of New York State. So somebody in Fabius generated this map 1825. Of course, at that time, this was Cortland County. It didn't have to be, they didn't have to draw that up. But you see, we have roads forming, some industry, steam mill, of course, no railroad. The Fagan map, 52. Now these are all maps that you can look at for a name of a house that might be yours. This is the last of our maps that have actual names of people. And I think a lot of these maps were actually generated for the census takers to help them go from house to house to know who was living there. I mentioned the federal and state, New York State Ag Census. These are the only years that are available for us to use. And this is the kind of data that they actually went to every farm and asked the number of acres improved, and some of them they asked what lot you were on. I was amazed in 1850 that a farmer would have this kind of information. I mean, if I'm asked today on my farm, you know, I couldn't necessarily answer those questions, but over here you can see the column that shows the amount of butter that they were making, and butter in 1850 was being made on that farm. Now, the census records aren't typed nice like this. This is Joanne's work, and after she's had to go research them and the handwriting was hard, she decided it was easier just to type it all. So this is something we're going to eventually upload to the Fabius archives. but we haven't yet. We haven't had many people ask us for this information. So, then the assessor's records. These are our records that we've been able to get our hands on and copy and use for the Historical Society, and they're really good at telling you who's on what chunk of property. This is the records from 1803, and if you look at this column right here, there's only 2 people that aren't farmers. You know, what else do you do? But it's amazing, and it actually can tell you the value, what they were assessed, and in the lot numbers over here that they're on. And then as we move on in time, 1848, the assessor's records look differently. Here they're listed by lot numbers. This happens to be the lot my farm sits on. And this was the only way we could find the guy who first was farming that to any degree, and we picked up this William Clark with 97 acres. So you can always look up grantees and grantors on any property up until about 1960 online for free. This is Onondaga County site. Now, every county has their own online services, but this is for Onondaga County. And let's see, I've got to hit a key to take us so we can go there. So this is Onondaga County site, and you're not spending any money yet, and you're going to sign in as a guest right here. Maybe I'll have to sit here. And then acknowledge that it may not be quite correct. Then you're going to go to the online index, and here it breaks down by year segments, because if they did them all at one time, you would get so many pages of hints. It would be really hard to find it, but I had the idea that I was going to go to my lot 12 and get the guy who won the award for the Revolutionary War and look up his grant. And what I found was the guy is dead. In 1780, his award comes 10 years later. So what happens? You know, did he get the award? Did he have a wife? Of course, women don't have ownership of land until about 1848. Maybe he had kids. So in my search, this one was pretty hard to come from his property to where we could get it in 1848. And I went into the courthouse and I worked with 5 different people there. And they couldn't come up with the books for those early transactions. And so I was a little lost and quite discouraged. But maybe you don't want to start out in 1790. Maybe you want to start out with just somebody that you know of. So, does anybody have anybody that they have questions on? They want to check on? No? So, okay. So I won't take the time, but we can move on here a little bit. Let me just hit this guy just so you can see how it happens. So, unfortunately, when you do hit Wall, was the name of Patrick Wall was my fellow who got my lot 12, and then you're going to pick up every name close to that, and then up here is the grantor, the guy who was selling, versus over here grantee, and we chose grantee up here because we wanted him to be buying the land. if we found out that he owned it and wanted to know what he did with it, we would switch him here over to grantor, and then we'd say search. And then we could find out as a grantor. But I've already told you that I looked hard and didn't find too much, but we did find a son, a James, that was selling off his dad's land. And in the deeds, when he read it, he never came to Fabius to sell them. He was living in Albany and selling them to different people. So. Alex, you may have to help me on that.
Try to go back. Keep several times.
Okay.
Keep doing it.
Okay. So maybe I'm safest down here out of your way. So this is just what's available. So here is my project to find Patrick Wall in 1790 to Bill and Joanne Casey. And this is my farm, what it looks like now. Good friend Mike Gleason, who looked for history for a number of years, came to me one day and had this auction billing, and he said, geez, this is Apulia, would you have any interest? And I said, well, geez, Mike, that's my farm. I said, where in the world did you find that thing? He goes, oh, you know, garage sales, I just kind of snooping around. Well, the people that didn't get the farm that bid against my father in this auction kept this and sold it at their garage sale. And Mike happened to be there going through the garage sale, probably buying a milk bottle or something. And these people remembered losing their chance to buy the farm and kept the flyer. My dad didn't have one. And this is what the farm looked like.
What was the date on that?
46.
46.
Yeah. And this is what they were selling. So look at the hillside, how it's changed. So this is just a red line showing you the acreage that was going to be with that. This is the Berry Road goes down to Clark Hollow. And there was all this land down in Clark Hollow that was pasture, was difficult farming. Here's where I learned about Patrick dying. Died September 1980. And this is all the searching I did of all the possible people that could have possibly owned that farm lot that I'm on. And I went through the courthouse and dug through maybe half of those. So just to summarize what we found, the first real evidence that we could have of somebody farming it was a fellow by the name of William Clark in 48 on 97 acres. And William sells to his son H.H. Clark. H.H. Clark, as we looked up in the census and everything, he had thousands of acres of land. He owned the canning factory in Fabius, part interest in the chair factory, part interest in the Fabius Creamery. What was he doing on my farm? But when you're a rich guy, you got to start somewhere. So he was on my farm milking. And the records show that he was milking 75 cows and making butter and cheese in his own home. Quite amazing. Then he sells to this Wilson Wallace. Now, asking my dad about previous owners and everything. He says, oh, Byron Griffin burned the barn down, and some guy owned the farm and traded it for an ice house in Syracuse, and all the ice melted and he went broke. You know, you got to put names with those people. So that was, the guy who traded the farm off was this William Wallace. And how the Wallace and the Clark got together, well, Wilson married Clark's daughter. So Clark took the mortgage from his son on the farm and went and invested in the chair factory, invested in the Fabius Creamery. And Wilson Wallace worked the farm. But then he hooked up with this Ward Ranger, 1896, and he was the one that had the ice business in Syracuse. And he trades the farm. Cows, equipment, everything, lock, stock, and barrel. So what's a photographer that has a job teaching in Syracuse University want with a farm in Apulia and cows and everything? Well, every year he rents it out to a different person. So he never comes to the farm, never. And I'm thinking to myself, I want a picture of the old barn that burned in 1911. What could be better than having a photographer own the farm, probably took a picture of the barn. We could not find it in his records. So Ranger, the photographer, dies, turns the farm over to his son. And his son is a self-taught artist, world famous, donates many, many watercolors, has a whole museum. Self-taught. Maybe he lived on the farm. Maybe he painted the barn that I wanted a picture of. Can't find it. So 1909, Henry Ranger sells to Byron Griffin. Byron Griffin's, he doesn't actually get the deed to the farm till 1915. He's on the farm operating it, and the barn burns in 1911. And it must have been a significant barn, and I'm wondering, is the foundation the same one that's falling apart now? Then Irving Skeel comes and builds him a new barn, has the concern about the foundation. So 1916 we find the actual transaction now. Why Byron Griffin bought and continued to buy the farm after the barn burned. But the story gets a little more interesting about looking for the picture of that farm. One day while Joanne and I were working out in the yard, a car pulls alongside there with an older couple. And they introduced themselves, and they used to come to the farm. She used to come to the farm as a young girl. And we said, well, geez, did you ever see the old barn? And she goes, oh yeah, I was in it the day the lightning struck it and burned it to the ground. She says, August 11th, I was up in the haymow, and I was lucky to get out. She goes, I was living there with my uncle all summer long. I said, would you happen to have a picture? And she goes, oh yeah, we got all kinds of pictures at home. She says, but they're way up and it's hard to get to them. And of course, Joanne and I said, please, we'll come in and help you find the picture. And she goes, oh no, we'll be out next week with the pictures. We don't know who she is, and we never saw her again. So anyways, the farm goes on to the Griffins, and then the daughter, Martha Gorman, takes over. And then World War II is going on, and then Irving Brower, out of New York City, needs to stay out of the draft. So he buys the farm. And then within a year's time, he sells it at the auction that Mike Gleason found for us. And then my father, and then to Joanne and I. So I collected a few pictures of these characters that own the farm. This is the rich H.H. Clark. Whoops. And this is Wilson Wallace. Now, Wilson became quite famous in the American dairy world because he and his brother George Wallace, now George used to own Leland House Farm.
Bingo.
Yeah. And he and his brother went around cutting cow horns. Okay, now we're not talking about the little horns on baby calves. We're talking about full-grown cows with big old horns. And there was a movement with the animal rights people to stop this. And there was a movement on the dairy industry to make it legal to take the horns off. Well, Wilson and his brother George were arrested for taking off the horns of 65 cows. And I kept reading the Tully Times thinking, okay, you know, did they get released from jail? What's the story? And 2 years later, a court case comes, and everybody lawyered up real heavy. The animal rights people wanted it to become illegal to remove the horns. And of course, dairy farmers wanted to do what's required. Yeah. Well, these guys won their case. And it's now legal in New York State to remove the horns. And because of old. Yeah. Yeah. But it's also a nasty, brutal thing to do when they're old. Wilson is kind of famous. Now, Wilson also had a son who was an attorney that probably helped. And he, of course, traded the farm and cows and equipment for the ice business. And maybe his son helped him with that, too. So, now here's our photographer. Doesn't look like a farmer. Irving in his diaries, and he's in Briggs' store, and he says, I think I saw Mrs. Ranger today. So she was in town, maybe cleaning the house between farmers. And this is the famous self-taught son. This is one of his paintings. Now, Henry also taught people painting and helped this man develop this portrait system to do portraits like this. And I don't know this man's name, but Henry takes some of the credit for that. And of course, old Byron Griffin. And we believe Byron is this fella here. And his son Harold, wife number 1. And Martha Gorman, Harold's daughter, with her husband William Gorman and their son Dana Gorman, all Fabius folks. And this is Irving, who bought the farm for a year to stay out of the draft and sold it at auction to my folks. And that's the end of history for the Fabius Casey family. So, yeah.
Bill, tell a story about Irving and Dwayne.
Oh. When Dwayne's scale was over, when I was doing the masonry, he told us many stories, but one, it would have been 1914 when the barn was built. Dwayne would have been 13 years old, and his father's rule was, you can play in the barns I'm building, but don't get up on the roof. Irving came over the roof and found Carl and Dwayne playing on the roof. And to teach them a lesson, he grabbed both of the boys, one under each arm, and walked the ridgepole of the barn with the boys. And Dwayne said he peed his pants. Yeah. So.
Wow. Fathers took no BS for kids. They
Yeah.
straightened
So.
them out one way or another.
Yeah. So does everybody live within the military track? Does everybody live within the military track that we showed? You're in Syracuse, you do. Bob does. Randy, no, you're over.
Lot 16.
Yeah. So, and Linda, she's over the line in Pompey.
Madison County.
No, you didn't make it. So, and Dick, of course, down in Cortland County, so he doesn't count. Onondaga County for us.
Bill, some of the information that you said that was free, when you went to the courthouse, did they start charging you?
No, everything at the courthouse is free to look at. If you want a copy made, you have to pay per page to have something made.
You can take your cell phone.
But,
Yeah, but you have to go through all the,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. And thank you, Mike.
So
Yeah.
much work. Wow.